Hello everyone and welcome to Art Block, the only show on the internet where, you've been drawing on the wrong layer this entire time. We see it, you know there's no way to fix it, just move on. I'm Cable Provider and I'm here today with my guest, ChibiWisdom. Ah! Spot on, Chibi, spot on. Chibi, thanks for being here today.
No problem.
So, Chibi's an old friend of mine. Chibi is what you would call one of them little artists on the internet, and by that I mean dude is a monster in terms of like his detail in the product that he pulls out. So I couldn't think of a better guest to get for this. And you know, I wanna just start it like right out the bat, because I know there's an interesting story behind how you learned to draw compared to how, like, you know, a lot of the people that we know started out. Chibi, why don't you tell us about how you first, like, how'd you first get into this? How'd you pick up the book to start drawing?
So, actually, there is a weird story about that. There's a specific book. I wish I had it, like, available, like, with me right now. But there was a specific book on, like, how to draw robots that I got when I was really young. Because I thought robots were cool. I've always thought robots are cool. Transformers is still, like, on one of my top tier favorite shows. And My Life as a Teenage Robot is one of my favorite cartoons. Fight me, people. But I got this book, and I would just get transfer paper. Remember back when transfer paper was actually something easy to buy?
Oh, shit.
But I would use transfer paper, and I would draw stuff constantly. Eventually, though, I ran out, and I just started freehanding a lot of it, trying to get things as identical as possible. And while I was doing all of that drawing of robots and things like that, I just eventually started drawing other things, and roughly around the same time, Halo Legends came out, and I started downloading or started drawing a whole lot of Halo stuff, and it all just kind of spiraled after that. I had a bunch of comic books of, like, Garfield specifically. Yeah, I had Garfield. And I also had a couple books of this this comic, this 4-panel comic called Pearls Before Swine. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I haven't.
But I would, like, draw, like, panels from those, like, comics, those books that I had. I also had learned about, like, Spy vs. Spy, and Baby Blues and things like that. And just that influence of, hey, here's this anatomy that was being taught to me through mecha, or specifically this one book of, like, how to draw mecha and stuff like that. I'll eventually send you, like, an image or, like, a link to the book if you want it, so that way you can like, post it up on screen.
Yeah, we'll put it in the description below this.
Cool. But it was a great resource for teaching me like, anatomy and how different body types and different shapes worked. And eventually, as I kept going along, I realized that I couldn't continue with just machines, and I started learning how to draw humans. And it's been a slow and arduous process, and I'm still learning.
I would say you're doing a pretty damn good job of it so far. Like, you've made a lot of different, like, both designs for NPCs and characters for Phantasma. And I've been blown away by everything you've produced, like, up to this point. You know, so here's an interesting question, I guess, going along that route. So, you're primarily, like, you started out learning how to draw with mecha. Like, that was, like, where your bread and butter was at the first part. Is there a style, like, I guess, or are there different, like, sub-styles of mecha that you prefer to do over other ones? Like, what's the, because I know mecha is a very broad term. Like, what does that mean to you if somebody brings that to you?
So, in like the mecha genre as a whole, Not talking about just specifically the Japanese like interpretation of mecha, but also the cartoon version of mecha, because they do exist. Things like, you know, Symbionic Titan. Oh gosh, the one where it's literally a giant robot with a car on top as a head.
Megas XLR.
Megas XLR. There are some really good like examples of like mecha, and mecha in general doesn't just mean giant robot to me personally. It means like here are these larger than life machines that have very specific tasks and are way too hyper specific and way too detailed to be like even close to reality. Like the Thundercats reboot where they had like the big old like tank panther thing. That I would throw into the mecha genre a little bit, because this is this super crazy, off the wall like big honkin' tank with a panther face at the front of it just because. But I love the Greeblies. The Greeblies is what's meant as a term used in mecha design. Is here is all of this detail on this thing that is designed to make it look as realistic as possible, but we as mecha designers don't need to care about like how realistic it is. We just need to or even how it looks. If it could work, that doesn't mean anything. It just needs to look cool and looks semi-realistic.
Huh. Like, I did not know that. I didn't even know that was a term. It's like, I gravitate so far away from mecha because it's extremely imposing to look at. It's like, I'm not doing all that. Like, I don't know how for the life of me you sit back and do it all the time, but like, it translates outside of mecha too. Like, you're very good with like approaching like detail in general. It's like, so not the standard question of like, oh, why do you like, how'd you get into doing detail and all that? It's like, no, not that. It's, do you have a favorite detail you like doing in a piece? Is there something about like when you get to work on a piece, if like you know it's a part of it, that you just like gravitate towards more than anything?
There are two, actually, and they're directly opposites of each other, oddly enough. When I'm doing art, I actually love, and I don't get to do it too often, so it doesn't really get to show up in a lot of my art, but I love battle damage. Battle damage is super cool, and anytime I get to see it, if you ever like watch like old 80s, 90s like anime where like mecha is present and you see them get like clobbered and destroyed, I'm going to actually point more towards Transformers the movie, which is a big inspiration for me. Where a lot of them get destroyed or damaged in any ways. You get to see all the battle damage, and it's all, the lines aren't clean and crisp anymore. They get kind of crunched up like if you ever got like a soda can and crunched it a little bit. I like that. And the exact opposite is I like drawing trees and bushes, nature. Nature is really fun to draw, in my personal opinion, because unlike drawing mecha or drawing humans or anything like buildings, especially, I don't like drawing buildings, but nature is fun because there is no rules to nature. So long as it vaguely looks like what it is you're trying to insinuate or imply, you're doing it correctly. And I feel it's very freeing when you work in a artistic format that standardly it's a lot of straight lines and it has to look as clean as possible. Nature is not clean.
So you raise an interesting point with that, which is, you know, as long as like it vaguely looks like what you're doing it right. I would say that at least from my personal opinion of seeing like how you do certain things and how other people perceive it, it's your high detail squad, as we call it. It's very imposing to people who are either new to art or even like people like me who have been doing it for a long time and like have slowly started like, you know, dip their pinky toe into the water of it. Meanwhile, you're like head first cannonballing into it like it's nobody's business. I usually like to ask these questions at the end, but I think maybe we can probably go off for a little bit on this and there might be some room to elaborate. But what do you let's say you have like Johnny New artist coming up to you, and they want to start to dabble into this stuff, but it's extremely intimidating to look at and like about to approach. Where would you suggest somebody start? Like, how would you suggest getting yourself acclimated to doing this type of art?
I appreciate that question because it's not the standard question that you would typically get. And this is a little bit of a, I guess, a joke at this point for a lot of artists in the online artist community is people coming up to you and going, "Can you teach me how to draw?" Well, the answer, unfortunately, is no. We can't teach anyone how to draw because it's a creative medium where anyone can create whatever they want. But in a situation like this, where it's someone asking for a place to start, a good starting point, and this is one of the reasons why I personally use Mecha as a great jumping off point, is because at the end of the day, a human being looks like a robot when you break them down into basic shapes. You know, the shoulder is a circle, and then everything coming off of that is just like a rectangle, and then you add another circle and another rectangle, and then you add a square, and that's an arm. That's a whole arm right there. And
it's not get existential now.
Yeah, you just work off of that, and that's what I would tell someone is, first and foremost, you need to have the time and patience to study how the human body works and how things work in tandem around you. The second that you can understand three-dimensional depth and you can comprehend how the basic structure of what you're doing is created, then you can start to transform that a little bit. Transformers. But you can manipulate it into whatever you want. I know a lot of more modern artists completely skip the realism phase. I hate drawing realism. I know a lot of artists who hate drawing realism, and that's completely fair because realism isn't fun. And we draw to exit reality, not to be a part of it.
When you say realism, you mean those like hyper-realistic drawings?
Oh yeah,
where
those
it's like
hyper-realistic, or where you go into high school and your art teacher wants you to draw everything with a realistic shading and things like that. People don't like doing it.
No, I'm always impressed by it, but it's never something I'm like excited to try out myself.
But it's because of the fact that you have to learn those things. Otherwise, when you break those bonds of reality, then it detaches itself from that reality entirely, instead of reality being incorporated into this new reality you've created. Reality has to exist somewhere within that piece.
There has to be a bit of grounds on it.
Exactly, and this is why understanding proportions is super important. Even if you're going to draw like a Chibi, or you're going to draw this like zany cartoon character, understanding proportions at the end of the day is still important. Otherwise, the character's going to look weird.
And there comes, like, at least from my experience, I don't know if you would agree with the statement, but when you understand proportions, you understand exactly where you can mess them up. So that way you know what looks good and what doesn't look good when you like overly... Because I would say... I guess maybe this would be a fair assessment to say, but would you say you and I, in terms of how we draw, we're like polar opposites in terms of what we're comfortable with?
Potentially.
Because I love me some super simplistic, like broken down, cartoony styled art. And you're pretty, like... I mean, I asked you to be a guest on this shit. That must mean I think pretty damn highly of you in terms of your art.
And I appreciate that.
But I appreciate that insight on that, because I hear that question a lot. Like I've had friends before in the past guess like, oh, can you show me how to do this? Can you show me how to draw? And it's like 90% of what I do when I draw, honest to God, is muscle memory. I don't remember the technical aspects of what I'm doing.
The unfortunate part about that question is the answer, while we could always just say no, um, is we have to provide the reasoning behind it that a lot of like new artists or people who are interested in art don't like to hear, which is that art is a heavy amount of time and effort put into it that you are not going to see the results instantly. And a lot of people want that instant gratification, or the people who aren't dedicated towards this medium don't understand that you can't just uh, draw a picture and it's a Picasso. It takes a long time to get to that Picasso, and eventually you can become faster at drawing and you can become better at it, but there's still years of time and effort that are required in order to get to that point.
Agreed. There's so much that goes into the back end of it that it's like I don't think you can really teach someone to draw because everybody's art style is like a fingerprint. Like it's different for every single person who does it, even if it's only in the most minute ways. And part of why I wanted to do art block in the first place is I wanted to like reach out to people who have these types of issues, like get the questions that people want to know like answered. Or it's like we can't teach you to draw, but there are some good places to look into. What would you say was your biggest hurdle when you started drawing?
Humans.
Any part of a human
like-
specifically, or just humans in general?
Well, so with my most recent art, anyone who can look at it will probably not believe me when I say this, but clothing and like the general like proportional like structure of humans is very different from that of a machine, so it took me a very long time to get used to it. Animals wasn't very hard because it was just a robot that has fallen on its side. What is a dog but a chicken, but with extra legs? That's how my brain thinks of it. But humans are so specific and so difficult that I honestly like would kind of encourage a younger version of myself at this point that studying humans instead of studying like machines probably would have been better for me, because when you have people who are doing commissions and things like that, people want their characters and their like weapons and things like that drawn, and that's great. But you don't get too many people commissioning for like robots. You don't get that. I still to this day have never gotten that actually. So that's why you don't see a whole lot of like mecha on my pages, despite the fact that I love drawing it.
Somebody should end up making like a slice of life like high school romance anime, but it's just big burly mechs.
They did actually.
Did they really?
There is an entire manga that you can read where it is a bunch of Gundams in a high school setting. And I think there's also another one for Evangelion as well, where it's just the Evangelions in like high schooler, like Japanese high school
There
outfits.
is, and I own it. It's right there on my bookshelf. Shit, I completely forgot about that. I forgot about that shit. You know, you brought up commissions, so let's get into like some more like let's drift away from the act of drawing in a sense. Let's talk about the whole like getting things shown off online, like promoting, getting commissions coming in, just getting an overall view of just like how can this medium that we both love to work in like start to yield something back to us in some ways. And what I would like to specifically talk about is it's a bit of a longer project, but we've talked about it a little bit already. But I want to give you a space to share it. You want to talk about Ocho a little bit?
Sure, we can talk about that. We don't have a whole lot of time left, so I'll try to make it as brief as possible. But I'm working on with a couple of collaborators a story of sorts that is mecha genre adjacent. but is more of my own personal love letter and answer to a lot of the criticism for the mecha genre that you would see online, like specifically Twitter, who would criticize the genre being stale. And I do agree that there is some formularity to it at this point that is a bit predictable. So I wanted to change that a little bit. So I came up with the idea of a series named Ocho, which was about a character named Ocho. Who would have guessed? But it is a post-apocalyptic series in which mecha, or just robots in general, are around, but they are closer in similarity to wild animals than they are to any super cognizant artificial AI like things that you would see in typical sci-fi or anything like that. And it's the idea of mecha has always been in my head that when you see shows like Gao Gai Gar, or Eureka 7, or Symbionic Titan, or Megas XLR, at the end of the day, the giant robot means something. It's a symbol. It represents what the show's like ethos is at the end of the day. Like, a really scary mech is scary, and you're supposed to not like it, or you think it's really cool. Sometimes both at the same time. But I wanted to stress the idea that in this series is that while they were probably at one point symbols, they are no longer symbols that represent people. As the people who these symbols once represented are just long gone. And at this point in time, these symbols are, at the end of the day, tools. A robot is still a robot and will always be a robot. A robot is not a person. It can't be a person. No matter how much artificial AI you pump into it, it can't be human. It can't be one of us. But I wanted to focus on the conversation of, and this is a very modern conversation nowadays, but it has been done before. So I'm not going to like put a thumb up my ass and just pretend like I'm original here. But of the conversation of how technology and humanity are interwoven, because they are interwoven, and they will probably for a very long time be like that, until the inevitable heat death of the universe.
Or, somebody spills water on a mainframe.
Oh, that too.
Like your favorite movie, Godzilla vs. Kong.
Haha, we did a whole review proving that no, we don't like that.
I hate that movie so fucking much. But from everything you've talked about it doesn't sound like you're like beating the proverbial horse to death or beating the dead horse. You have an interesting approach to Ocho that I actually really like, which is the and this is something I would say, I guess the last point I want to talk with you a little bit about is not so much your like artistic sense in terms of drawing. I want to know about your writing sense a little bit. Like when you conceptualize this and knowing how like the tone you want to keep for your story, and I'm sure you have like a good portion of your story beats like at least conceptualized at this point, but how do you get yourself into the space to write more for Ocho? Or when it comes to developing Ocho's story, what are some things that you find help you best when you want to do that?
When it comes to writing, so this is like not even talking about art here,
Well,
just writing in general.
Art is writing.
Yes,
writing is art.
But, talking about more like drawing versus writing. But when I'm doing writing, how I set things up, and this is what I even do for D&D campaigns. I set up a beginning portion, and I have an end goal in mind. So you always have to have your beginning and end, obviously. A strong beginning is incredibly important because someone's going to read like the first couple pages of your story, and if it's super boring, they're not going to continue reading it. That's just how it's always been for me. I don't know enough people who go, oh yeah, this book gets really good once you get to chapter 12. It's like, no,
Do you mean page 12? Because I'm not getting to chapter 12.
I'm not doing that. But you have to have a good beginning and a good end. And when I'm creating a story, I figure out, well, how can I get there? And I come up with little ideas, and I put bullet points in between that beginning and end. And I go, well, how do I connect this part to this part and this part to this part? And it slowly becomes like a nice interwoven like connection of lines, almost like a bit of a ladder or a helix where everything connects to everything in the end. But it is a lot of like throwing ideas at the wall and seeing if it sticks. It's completely fine if some ideas fall flat and some ideas work. This is why revisions exist.
No doubt.
In a D&D context, it's even greater because you have instant feedback from your players who go, I don't like this. And you're like, cool, I'll change it.
When it comes to that process, then I guess the follow-up question would be, so, revisions will need to happen, obviously. Do you, what's the right way to phrase this question? Because it's a little bit of a weird one, but I guess, how do you feel about retconning yourself down the line if you find that there's something let's say you do something in, like, the first part of Ocho that you need to, like, find a solution for towards the middle part, and it's like, oh, what would you do? Would you adjust your story to allow something to change, or how do you feel about retconning, like, previous information? Or how would you go about retconning if you had to do it?
I think the best way I can use this as a brief like story jumping off point here is, I think a good way you can prevent yourself from writing into a corner like that is provide the information that you had previously to characters who might not have all of the information. So that way, if a change in the status quo of your story or information that needs to get retconned like above the story, it doesn't feel like a retcon. And this is what happens if you're ever familiar with the Alien franchise.
Not enough.
The whole the idea of the aliens was that any information that we get as the audience is given by soldiers or scientists who barely understand how this thing functions. And that's why when the alien proves the character wrong, it doesn't feel like we're being cheated, because it was these characters who had no way of actually knowing the truth.
Okay. That's not bad. That's actually kind of neat, honestly. It's not subverting expectation. It's pretty much letting you jump to your own conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a very cool way to write. I think we're approaching closer towards the end. This isn't a super long one, but I got some quick rapid fire questions if you wanted to shoot through them real quick.
Okay, real quick.
All right, cool. First question for you, ChibiWisdom. Give me your favorite pose. It can be from an anime, a cartoon, a movie, whatever it is, but what pose gets the fucking neurons activated in your brain? Like, I know, like, our friend Louise, who will be on our block soon as I can get him onto a fucking episode, he's a big fan of that fucking, I don't know what it is, but it's like the sword.
The Obari pose.
Is that what it is?
It's the Obari pose, yes.
You got a pose in mind?
Not necessarily a pose, but I do always appreciate the Akira slide whenever it happens. So, like, you ever get to see it, it's fantastic. I could be like a 14-year-old here and go like, I love like the Kamina, like not the Kamina, the Gurren Lagann pose, where with just the arms crossed and just A posing basically, legs split across and arms folded. It makes drawing hands so easy because you don't have to draw hands.
That's one of the first places I learned how to avoid doing that shit. It was like, wait, you can just have characters put their hands in their pockets?
Yeah, you can. And it looks good.
Like, don't get me started when Naruto came around and the Akatsuki had cloaks that covered their entire arms and torsos. It was like, wait, what?
That's convenient.
They just drew a head and then they copy and pasted the same coat over and over again. Fucking A!
If it works.
If it works. What was the other one I have on this list? Oh, okay, so on the opposite of least favorite pose, think about, and this one might require you to think a little bit, because you watch a lot of series. I know you pull like a lot of inspiration stuff, and you like, you know, do like a lot of your research and things. But from any series that you can think of that you think has had like a, and I actually can think of an example of something right now that we talked about not too long ago. But has there ever been a series where you feel like the way it was animated like directly impacted how you felt about the story being told? Like, has the animation ever like messed with like the perceived like the perceived like bits of information that you're getting?
Oh gosh. Yes. I'm trying to think of like good examples of that.
There was that Transformers thing you showed me not too long ago, where, and this isn't even to like, this isn't like bashing on anybody by any means, because it still looked like fucking fantastic. It's like, it had that really good like opening animation for Starscream and all that, but then when it got a little like CG towards the middle portion of it.
Oh yeah, that that's the issue between like different mediums being created or being like processed in different ways. Like a CG explosion in a animation where everything looks 2D, it might all be CG, but if it all looks 2D but the explosion is very obviously CG, that takes you out of it. It ruins the immersion a little bit.
Yeah, the question came because I actually remembered like you bringing that up before. I was curious if you might have any other examples, or if there's a style of. I guess we can even simplify, because that's a very broad question.
I do actually, and this is gonna get a lot of hate. It's one of the key fundamental reasons why I didn't like the most recent season of Demon Slayer.
Go for it.
And it was because of, and this is gonna sound so ridiculous, very obvious GIF fire.
I haven't. Wait, hold on. Go into detail. What are you talking about?
There are several scenes in near at the end of like the red light district arc, where there's a lot of fire going on, and it's very obvious to me when I was looking at it that a lot of the fire in the background is not only CG, but some of it looks about the highest quality of a GIF file. And when you realize that, it takes you out of it a little bit, like the fire isn't even actually there. Now, obviously I know that there's no way that they can animate all of that fire. That's just way too much. However, I don't think that that is an excuse for lazy, like, set direction and, like, cinematography.
I agree.
There's also a scene where, I think in the same season, where there's like a field of like wheat, and the wheat is all CG, which is very, puts you off a little bit. It put me off. Maybe for a lot of people, they just never noticed it, and that's totally fine. But when I can counter that with something that was going on at the same time during that season, which was Ranking of Kings, which had none of that stuff going on, and I thought that was beautiful. It was beautiful. There was not a single bit of CG that I could notice, or if there was even if there was CG, I didn't see it, and that's awesome.
Yeah, the best way to hide CG is like if you can't see it's happening, then I think that's when it looks the nicest. Or the other, I guess, front I would say is like if it's all CG, at least you know what you're going into.
Yeah.
It's like, because honestly, Dragon Ball Super Superhero was all CG, and I fucking love that movie. Aside from a couple points, but overall, I love that movie.
You go in expecting it to be CG because the trailer didn't hide anything from you.
CG has its weirdness with, like, I would have still liked it to be, like, animated traditionally, like, in the older styles. I think that might have made Gohan Beast's hair look a little bit better because it does not look flattering from certain angles. But it's such a little nitpicky thing from an overall good product. But, I think honestly that might be the majority of what I wanted to ask you today, Chibi. I wanted to get a little insight into the man who runs High Detail Squad with Final Phantasma, the proverbial beast and titan himself. Do you have any final words for the people here on Art Block?
My final piece of advice is, if you're listening to this while drawing, check your layers right now. Make sure that everything is exactly where it needs to be, because I can guarantee you something is not on the right layer. Check it real quick. I bet.
You heard him, everybody. Well, I've been Cable Provider, this has been ChibiWisdom, and this has been another episode of Art Block. I will be back again with another guest. Like I said, probably going to try to get Louise. I got a few other people in the chamber, just hoping to get them locked down and get a time set to go. And worst case scenario, if I can't get an art block made by next month, I will post a 30-minute video of eggs being made. And that is a promise.
Hey, I want that video no matter what.
Maybe I'll post an egg video, we'll see. Anyway, bye everybody, and you all have yourselves a good whatever time it is for you. I have no idea how to end these things.